I have just finished something that I thought was a great yarn. It is what I think of as modern science fiction. It's written in the 2000s. John Scalzi's The End of All Things. Slightly misnamed. The universe doesn't implode at the end of it. So me and John Scalzi, I'd never heard of him until I happened to be at some book fair or book sale, and I came across this book that was clearly science fiction of the best sort, called Old Man's War. That was in 2019. So Scalzi had been around for quite a while and I'd somehow never heard of him. In my defense, at that point I still hadn't discovered BookTube or any of them sorts of things. I relied on Goodreads and luck for my reading matter. And some authors just gel for you, and Scalzi's writing gelled for me from the get-go. I really enjoy it. There is so much about the end of all things that works. Amongst other things, what works is that even though it's part of the Old Man's War series, it stands alone, and all the ones of his that I have encountered so far stand alone perfectly well as a book that you can read on its own. You don't have to read it in sequence. And in The End of All Things, I feel that at the beginning there's a few details that might make more sense or work for you a little bit better if you've read more of the series. But it's a long time since I read the last one, and it didn't much matter. I did vaguely remember that Earth had this deal where, the start of Old Man's War was where me and the Scalzi's books first started. And Old Man's War starts with John Perry did two things on his 75th birthday. First, he visited his wife's grave, then he joined the army, which was a great start. And I've always remembered it, so I've always remembered this key factor that the human-occupied space recruits its soldiers which then become its colonists from old men and women, we're equal here, who then become the warriors out in space. It helps if you remember that before starting this book, but I don't think it's essential. This is a completely different story. The thing that threw me... Oh, yes. So, as you can see, the book hasn't weathered well me reading it. It was very windy on the beach, which is where I read most of the last part of it, from about here onward, and it's amazing how many little sand grains can get caught in there and wreak havoc. I'm going to have to try brushing them out with a paintbrush later, because I want to keep this book and I'm sure I'll read it again. What is it, chicken? Chirp. In this one we start with an individual. Oh yeah, it's going to be spoiler city. Whatever. We start with an individual who is about to become the pilot on a ship that's basically a Trident ship. He's been blacklisted as a pilot for a while. He just wants to get back into piloting. He takes the first job. It's going to be a drudge, a 3-stop triangle ship. It's going to be boring. And then it isn't. Because a senator, I think he's a senator, called Campo gets on board and everything goes really, really poorly after that for our main character, D, something beginning with a D? Rafe, something beginning with a D. Annoying, I've forgotten it. Okay, let's assume it's Rafe. No, let me find it for you. Okay. This is taking too long. This is annoying. I wish I still had a memory. Okay, it starts with one guy. We'll call him Rafe. I could be wrong. Sorry, Scalzi, if I'm wrong. He takes this job as pilot. He's going to be doing this route, but then they're hijacked, and in a very messy scene, they're hijacked by an alien race who want a pilot, and when they get the pilot, they take the ship and the pilot, who is our main character, and off they go. When they reach their destination, this man's brain is taken out of his body and put into a box. He's going to control the ship. I kept thinking Anne McCaffrey and the Ship Who Sung and all that sort of thing. But yeah. Anyway, this is a more adult theme and a less pleasant reasoning. He learns how to control the ship in as much as they let him control it, which is basically he's going to do missions for this alien race. He's going to explode things and then he's going to come back. Their promise is that at the end of that he will be given his body back. He knows they're lying. One thing about our friend here that they don't know, and which lets this whole story commence, is that before he was a pilot, he was an engineer of the computing variety. So he actually knows all the systems inside out. He's able to fool the system and get more control of the ship than they want him to have. And then eventually he hijacks the ship. And with it, he takes the senator who first betrayed him and his shipmates and who's a traitor to this group. At that point, I was loving the story and I was fully invested. And then it ended. This first little story that I had enjoyed so much, and which is called The Life of the Mind. It absolutely floored me to find out that this whole book is actually 4 novellas and they're interconnected. I don't normally like books that have stories that have interconnected stories and themes, but this one, it was enough of a overall story that meshed together. I didn't mind it too much. In the second novella, however, This Hollow Union, I was a little bit devastated to lose my main character who I'd enjoyed very much. But in the next one, we find out more about the politics of space. So you've got the Earth, which is its own thing. You've got a whole heap of humans outside Earth, and that's the colonial union. The humans had been extracted from Earth to feed the colonial defense forces, but Earth isn't playing game with the colonial union anymore. We've got a whole heap of colonized planets that are sick of the union and are looking at rebelling. In the meantime, you've got this huge amalgam of all the other races in the galaxy, most of whom seem to absolutely loathe Earth and humanity, which, I mean, I can see their point, to be honest. They have a collective whose name I've also forgotten. But that's where the second story starts. It talks about the general who put together this confederation, and we see it mostly through the eyes of their second in command. Neither of these are human. There are 400 species, planets in this union, and none of them are human, none of them like humans. But in this story, the amalgam, what they're called, something beginning with M. I'm doing that a lot today. Something beginning with M, something beginning with D, whatever. Whatever. Anyway, they're forced to deal with Earth, and they're forced to deal with the colonial union. And this is where we learn a little bit more about the group called Equilibrium, who kidnapped our pilot in the first novel. These themes continue throughout. So in the third of the little novellas, sections, parts, whatever, we are in a platoon of 4 characters, and they are being, instead of fighting aliens, which is what they used to do, they're being sent from one colony planet to another, suppressing the rebellions that are popping up left, right, and centre. This third novella reminded me of one of the things that make me really enjoy Scalzi's writing, and that's the dialogue. This guy does dialogue, and it's really fun to read. It's enjoyable. His characterization is good. His plot line is usually, I believe it's superbly plotted out, because you've got huge number of plots that interconnect, but the reading of it doesn't feel laborious. You don't have to work to figure out where the plot's been and where it's going. You can just read and enjoy. Share and enjoy. No, read and enjoy. Sorry, Douglas Adams. Yes, but so in this third novella, you've got this platoon. They communicate either verbally or through little implants of nuggets in their brain. There's 4 of them. There's the commander, Heather Lee, and there's 3 people under her command. The dialogue between them is fun and it's entertaining. It is almost certainly not especially believable. You get a lot of dialogue in small platoons and military groupings where they know each other, and it's not inconsistent with that, but it's sharp and it's funny, and it's really slapstick at times. So it's fun to read. It's maybe a little bit more literate and intelligent than you're going to get from the man and woman off the street. But while that impressed me in Old Man's War as well, the thing that makes it work better is that each of these characters had a full lifetime before they became young again, soldiers with a whole heap of enhancements that lets them fight around the galaxy. So yes, if someone was 75 years old, a retired literature teacher, it's more believable that they can be that intelligent and have dialogue that good. I won't mention how that story ends. They're soldiers and there's a lot of warring happening. It doesn't end well for everyone. The ending of it and what Heather Lee does is really fascinating, and I love that. As an ending to a segment, I really can't see it doing better. Now in the 4th one, it all comes together. You've got the 2 human associations, Earth and the Sea Colonial Union. They discover stuff about the equilibrium and the equilibrium's overall plot, which has been on the back burner for the whole of the novel. It seems that what the equilibrium is doing is it's enticing planets to rebel against the CU and promising them protection. But instead of giving them protection as promised, they are reneging on the deal for their own purposes. And humanity, through the CU, which is then communicated to Earth, discovers that their ultimate goal is to nuke the Earth into non-existence. And how they manage to get around that is a really, really good story. So the last story and the end of all things is so much fun. Actually, they're all fun. I was hooked early on in the first novella story, and I went all the way through. There were parts I liked better, there were parts I liked worse, but the first one was excellent, and the last one completely and utterly gripped me from start to finish. I love the level of science fiction that Scalzi puts into his books. So one of the things I loved about classic science fiction was that it explored possibilities, and a lot of the possibilities that were being explored in the 60s and 70s are either not possibilities or just aren't really on the scientific card anymore. But I like that amount of speculative science that was used to put together a story. Scalzi does the same. You've got a whole heap of things, both in the brain and the can idea. He inserts small bits of science that work in context of the part of the storyline that you're involved in. He never overwhelms you. It isn't one of those science fiction books where you seriously need to sit there with Google on one hand to check the physics of what you're reading about if you've got any hope of understanding it. No, you can just read through the bits of science at fun. Whether they're all accurate, as pretty much as The Martian did, Andy Weir, I think virtually all of his science is accurate. I don't know if Scalzi's is. I'm not enough of a science geek to really care. It works in context of the novel. It's believable the way he writes about it, and I enjoy it thoroughly. Now, one more thing about this heavily sand and surf mutilated book is at the end you have an alternative ending, or an alternative the life of the mind, deleted in alternative scenes. And there's a note from the author talking about how all these different sections that he'd meant to put into the actual book, which he's put in there for us to read. When I finished the actual novel proper, I went goody and I dived straight into that. I read the first bit and I really enjoyed it, and then I rethought my life choices. I'm going to go away and I'm going to muse about this book and enjoy the aftertaste of reading it. And then maybe at some stage I'll come back to this really quite small bit of unused segments. I'm sure they'll be just as beautifully written. I don't have a problem with alternative universes, so I'm sure I can deal with alternative options. But as a whole, this rather chunky book comes together so well in its 4 sections that I kind of don't want to ruin the taste. It's a really good book. I'm delighted to have discovered Scalzi. I look forward to reading more of his work in the future. In terms of modern science fiction, I think this is perhaps one of my more favourite strands. This level of good writing, good plotting, and good dialogue all works for me really, really well. So, thank you for listening to me rave about how much I enjoyed it, and like, comment, and subscribe if you feel like it.